Hey there, EB here on the Anything But Bland weekly update. It's Thursday, January 30th. Can you believe we're almost through the month of January? We're going to cover a lot of territory today, so put your seatbelts on, chin straps, and let's get ready for the ride. Unfortunately, we had a catastrophic plane crash last night at Reagan National Airport, an American Airlines plane coming in from Wichita, Kansas, that had about 60 people on it. Um, Collided with a Marine helicopter, a Black Hawk helicopter, right over the Potomac. It was seen by a lot of people who were driving from work or late at night, and it was a fiery crash. And unfortunately, it appears there were no survivors. The plane broke into three parts. Um, we always are scared when we get in a plane, and we want to make sure that the planes are uh, that the maintenance is done perfectly on a plane and there's no issues. We are always concerned about the traffic in major metropolitan areas like DC, New York, where a lot of planes are coming and going, and especially in DC, where there's a lot of armed forces activity, where there's a lot of helicopter uh, rides where they're taking diplomats or politicians back and forth from the Pentagon to Virginia. Um, and there's tons of planes coming in. Fortunately, it's the first crash that we've had since 2006. And when you think about that, that's amazing, meaning a commercial airliner crash. There's obviously been a lot of private plane crashes. And there must have been, 3 million commercial flights in the United States since that time. So air travel is truly the safest way of traveling, although we are nervous every time most people, when they get in a plane, me included. Um, it's pretty scary because American Airlines was coming in on that runway, and it seems that there wasn't a coordination between the air traffic controller for the airport along with the military air traffic controller. I can't imagine that there's alarms on these planes which tell you have to ascend or descend, accelerate or decelerate. It's just totally tragic. This was the second time there's been a air crash in DC, and the Potomac one was back in 1982. And it's just scary stuff. And this is why we don't want to cut every single federal department, whether it's the FAA, the National Transportation Safety Board. DOGE is taking a literal hatchet to a lot of these federal programs. That's Elon Musk's Department of Governmental Efficiency, and there's been a lot of cutting that has taken place. But let's see how the investigation turns out, whose fault it was. They're going to determine whether there was pilot error, or it was the people who were flying the helicopters. Was there a mistake by the air traffic controller? So one of the things is it's really a very high traffic airport. The senator from Kansas, where this came from, Wichita, he actually was responsible for getting a direct route finally from Wichita, Kansas to DC. And I listened this morning to the press conference, and there's a lot of pushback from the Virginia senators as well as the Maryland senators not to expand the number of flights that come into Reagan National, because it's such a dangerous airport. So our condolences obviously go out for the family and the loved ones. It's just really a horrific thing. So let's wait and see what the investigation reveals, and we'll go from there. So I think we're going to talk a lot today about what President Trump has done in the first week and a half in office. We'll talk about the sports, Super Bowl, NBA. Also, we'll talk about the 250 best albums that Rolling Stone has rated that have come out since 2000 in the 21st century. But remember when President Trump was running for office this summer and they asked him about Project 2025, which was the 1,000-page manual that a bunch of different conservative political action committees and nonprofit groups have gotten together and wrote. He said he knew nothing about it, but if you look at how it's unfolded, all of these executive orders, you will see that Project 2025 is being followed to a T. So, it's every minute almost of every day, a new executive order is coming out. And some of these are decent and that, we can get our arms around, but some are pretty scary. It's no surprise that President Trump did run on, deconstructing government. That's what Steve Bannon and a lot of his supporters talked about, that they were going to dismantle the deep state they believe that has infiltrated the federal government. And there are a lot of people in the federal government that have their own agenda that's separate and apart maybe from what the philosophy is of the department head or the cabinet head. But when you deconstruct government, it does look like you're getting a lot done, but all you're really doing is tearing things down. It's really difficult to build things up. It's pretty easy to tear shit down. So there are a number of things that we're going to talk about. There was the pausing of federal aid for 24 hours. And this was a scary thing. Trump put in a memo that everything that Congress had appropriated, already voted on, and was signed on by the president. This is allocated money. Remember, the power of the purse belongs to the House Ways and Means Committee. Trump paused all that, and there was a real problem with that because that exceeded his executive power. A judge immediately placed an injunction on that, and this could have had a devastating impact on hundreds of thousands of grant recipients, from Meals on Wheels to Medicaid Medicaid payments for people who need medicine and treatment, for some organizations that do research for cancer, for abuse shelters. Don't forget, it's not only just salaries that pay to people, but it's rent, it's insurance, it's their ability to pay for utilities. And almost immediately there was an outcry by a bipartisan uproar in Congress, because a lot of senators were hearing from their constituents, hey, this isn't right. We need to back off on this. So yesterday, Trump had to reverse course and said, we're going to not implement the memo. However, what he did say is we are going to implement the cuts. So the judge refused to lift the injunction, and there's going to be an injunction hearing on Monday. This is in conflict. It's creating a constitutional conflict because Article 1 provides of the Constitution provides the powers to the legislature, the power of the purse. And they usually take it with a lot of umbrage if you're going to cut their powers or cut their authority or not comply with what they put in the law as a bill. But they don't seem to be too upset right now with President Trump is doing. And what he's doing is what's known as a line item vetoing. He's just vetoing across the board different allocations of funds and programs. And we don't have a line item veto. That is not something that the President of the United States is permitted to do. And a lot of this stuff impacts rural communities where there are, Republican MAGA voters. And so there were a lot of MAGA voters that really got upset about this. So that is something that we really should keep an eye on, that there often are unintended consequences when you, across the board decide to put a pause on federal money and federal aid. There's people that rely on that money every week. Yesterday, President Trump announced that he was going to send 30,000 illegal immigrants, those that are picked up because of criminal activity or because they don't have proper identification, and send them to Guantanamo Bay in Cuba. That's a pretty aggressive thing to do. The price tag for doing that is somewhere between $50 billion and $100 billion. and President Trump said he was going to start taking money from the National Transportation Safety Authority, those that keep us safe when we go through airports, and that's problematic because we want to make sure that we're safe when we fly through an airport, that there's enough personnel that we don't have to wait 2 or 3 hours to get through the lines. And to go to Guantanamo Bay, there's going to be a ton of lawsuits about that because these people are not going to be able to meet with their lawyers. And it's also very expensive to house prisoners in Guantanamo Bay. We've had a long-standing lease of the Guantanamo Bay with Cuba, even though that we don't have diplomatic relations anymore with Cuba, and we've been basically at odds with them for the last 50, 60 years since the revolution of Castro. We still have a long-term lease for Guantanamo Bay. At one time after September 11th, we had over 300 terrorists there. Now we only have 7. And you remember a couple months ago, it was agreed to that in exchange for these highly aggressive terrorists like Khalid Sheikh Mohammed not getting the death penalty, they would get life imprisonment. To house 30,000 immigrants at Guantanamo Bay, the costs are going to be enormous. I heard that every time you land a plane there, it basically costs about $100,000. And we're talking about food, we're talking about laundry, we're talking about medical equipment, medical services, all the different things that families and children will need there. And I just think that this is something that I don't think we're going to go through with it. I would be surprised if Congress authorizes it. It's kind of like a threat to send people to Siberia and Russia. And maybe it'll work. Maybe it'll dissuade some illegal aliens from coming into the country, knowing that they could end up in Guantanamo Bay. Earlier this week, Trump offered 2 million federal workers the option to resign. It's called a fork in the road. It's the same email that Elon Musk sent to his ex-Twitter employees or ex-employees when he bought Twitter a year and a half ago. It's the same reference he put on there, fork in the road. And essentially what he's saying is he's going to give them the opportunity to resign, and they'll be able to be paid through September of this year. It's not known whether they can leave now and get their payment or that they have to actually work. But this is another way of him permitting people to resign rather than get fired, and it's a way of him cleaning up the federal payroll. This is the influence that he's getting from Elon Musk. There was a firing of many U.S. attorneys this past week who were involved in different prosecutions of Trump. And that's a real problem because the DOJ said we are terminating these employees or reassigning them to like desk jobs, or, they went from these high profile prosecutions to very ministerial type of legal work. It's going to force them to quit. Nobody's going to, go from being a trial attorney to sitting at a desk pushing paper. But what they said is that President Trump wants to fill the Justice Department with people that will follow his agenda. Well, that is absolutely not what the Justice Department is supposed to do. They're supposed to be independent. Yes, they're under the executive branch, but they are not supposed to follow the president's agenda. They are supposed to be independent, and that's a real problem, and that was very problematic for a lot of the courts who saw that that was a justification for terminating these federal employees. A new federal district attorney or U.S. attorney was named for Washington, D.C. this week, Ed Martin. He's one of the guys that was speaking on January 6th, 2021, and said that this is a day of love, a day of faith, a day of peace. And what is he doing? He's now looking at prosecuting all the attorneys that prosecuted the January 6 cases. We talked about the pardons that were given to all these convicted felons last week. He's going to look into prosecuting the actual U.S. attorneys that were following the law, because the law they were following was a law that said if you interfere with a governmental proceeding, it could be considered a felony. The Supreme Court said it was too nebulous of a crime, but they were enforcing a crime that was on the books, and this is how we are going to now spend money going forward. Instead of prosecuting terrorists, drug addicts, cartels, sex traffickers. This district attorney, U.S. attorney, is going to spend his time trying to prosecute former U.S. attorneys. I just find it to be shocking. The DeepSeek China AI company killed the market this week when it came out and said that we can do AI for about $5.5 million. And you know that President Trump announced that we're going to do AI for about $500 billion. And so the tech market took a beating this week because it lost $1 trillion on this AI, because evidently China can do this a lot cheaper without using the chips that America is going to have to use. So, we were supposed to get $500 million from Oracle and SoftBank. So that's an interesting thing. Remember in the first Trump term, we talked about the emoluments clause in the Constitution, which prevents the executive branch from doing things personally that will enrich them personally. And Trump was going to have the G8 conference at Doral Country Club, his country club in Miami. And they said, no, you can't do that because you're personally going to make money. Well, the emoluments clause is that argument. Nobody wants to fight that anymore, even though that it's in the Constitution. And this week, Donald Trump had about 218 House Republicans come to Doral for a 3-day workshop. So can you imagine how much was charged to our federal government for the use of that facility for 3 days by 218 House of Representatives? The additional thing is Trump is starting to gun already for a third term. He said it 2 or 3 times since his inauguration that he thinks that he can run for a third term. A House member has actually introduced a bill that would provide the ability for Trump to run for a third term. The only problem is there's a constitutional amendment that would have to be a hurdle. Congress would have to agree to it and then enact it, and then 2/3 of the estates would have to agree to amend the Constitution to permit a president to run for 3 terms. They don't have to be consecutive. Remember, Trump's the first president since Grover Cleveland to be president in 2 separate terms that aren't consecutive. So that's the interesting thing. The DEI dismantling is taking place not only in the government, but also in the private sector. Target has cut all of its DEI programs, cut the requirement that a lot of their vendors be minority-owned and suppliers. So that was an interesting thing. And then for a day, the Air Force took down the Tuskegee Airmen videos from all of the different defense installments, the defense where we have military bases. And that caused an uproar even amongst Republican senators and Republican House. And so they put that back up. We have Pete Hegseth. The first thing that he's done is he's brought General Milley, a 4-star general who's fought in 4 different wars, not just behind the desk type of general, but fought in 4 different wars, who's a 4-star general. He wants to start a commission to take a star away from him because, as you recall, President Trump is very upset with him. One, because he apologized to the American people after going to the church when Trump held the Bible up in his first term upside down. General Milley was there wearing his fatigues, and he said we should have never gotten involved in the military is not supposed to get involved in political type of events like that. And so Trump got very upset with him at that. And then also during January 6th, when we were having all the upheaval at the Capitol, General Milley, as well as some other people in the government, reassured some of our allies and adversaries that everything is okay with the American government. It's not going to be overthrown. And Trump was very upset that General Milley did that. But that's something that the National Intelligence Officers, CIA, they do that all the time. They use their back channels to make sure that everything remains calm with our allies and our adversaries. So as a result of that, President Trump took away his security detail, took away Mike Pompeo's security detail. John Bolton, who was the former director of national intelligence, Mike Pompeo obviously was a CIA director, Secretary of State, and he took away another guy named Hook. That's a real problem. It's one thing to take away Anthony Fauci, although he's getting death threats. But these 4 government employees have a death threat against them by Iran because they participated in the operation to take out General Soleimani, which was the highest ranking general of the Iranian Republican National Guard. And he was taken out and killed in 2019. Lindsey Graham and Tom Cotton, very conservative Republicans on the Armed Forces Committee in the Senate, were very disappointed in that because they think it's going to dissuade people from serving in government if there are death threats and we take away their security detail. They went back to President Trump and he said, too bad, I'm taking away their security detail. I think that's a really bad thing. Mitch McConnell voted against Hegseth to get in his Department of Defense. It was a 50-50 vote, Lisa Murkowski and Susan Collins and him, and it caused J.D. Vance to break the tie. Pete Hegseth is the first Defense Department chairman that basically got in on a tie-breaking vote. Usually they're voted in overwhelming, like Mark Rubio was done, Ratcliffe at the head of the CIA, Kristi Noem of Department of Homeland Security. Yesterday we had a very troubling hearing, and there's one today for Robert Kennedy Jr., who is running for getting appointed to the HHS. His cousin Carolyn Kennedy, who was the daughter of John F. Kennedy and a former U.S. ambassador, came out Tuesday night, and she wrote a letter and did a video and said that he's a troubled man. He did a ton of drugs when he was a kid, that he's a hypocrite. He's vaccinated his kids, and yet he's told everybody else don't vaccinate their kids. He had predator birds his whole life and would brag and show that he would put mice and little chickens in a blender to give to his birds. She said he's a troubled man, plus he's a womanizer. Yet he went before Congress yesterday and said that even though he was pro-choice his whole life, he's now going to be pro-life for Donald Trump. He voiced some of his skepticism about vaccines yesterday, and he's one guy that I think there's going to be a tough vote for him to get through. Then it's Tulsi Gabbard and then Kash Patel. Trump cut off all aid to Ukraine and all foreign aid. That's a really big thing, except to Israel and Egypt over the next 90 days. The other thing that he did is he suggested that the Palestinians leave the Gaza Strip, and that the other Arab countries take them in, and basically you make Gaza Strip a parking lot. That didn't go over too well. No Arab countries want to take the Palestinians in because they're really not highly skilled people, and they don't want to give up their homeland. That was viewed as a very aggressive act by the United States. Really excited. The Hall of Fame put in Ichiro Suzuki. He's had over 3,000 hits in the major leagues. He played for Seattle. He played for the Yankees. Just an amazing pure hitter and base runner. He got every vote except one, which is stunning to me. We want to find out who was the one person that didn't vote him in. This guy was a sure unanimous ballot Hall of Famer. CC Sabathia got in for the Yankees. He played for the Yankees and the Cleveland Indians, a great postseason pitcher. Not sure he should have got in. And also Billy Wagner got in. He was a reliever for the Mets. Really getting a little bit concerned about the quality of the people that they're letting into the Baseball Hall of Fame. Good players, but they're not generational. They're not great. They're not the great baseball players. So that's one thing that we want to think about. Trump has threatened to expand the United States borders, obviously with taking in the Panama Canal, as well as wanting Greenland. That would be imperialistic type of actions by the military against a NATO country. Denmark's a NATO country that owns Greenland. And if they do that, Article 5 says once a NATO country's attacked, all the other NATO countries have to come to the rescue and attack as well. So that would be interesting. It would be NATO countries against NATO countries. Trump has released 50,000 soldiers to the border of the United States. Right now, they're not doing law enforcement function. They're doing assistant functions of transportation. But that's in danger of violating the Posse Commissar law of the 1850s, where we are not allowed to let military do law enforcement. So that's going to be an issue that's going to that we should watch closely. Trump fired 17 inspector generals, and that is a violation of federal law. You have to give 30 days advance notice to Congress of your desire to terminate an inspector general because they're supposed to be independent. Charles Grassley, a Republican senator from Iowa, was very upset about that. Obviously, this will end up in the courts, and these inspector generals will get an additional 30 days pay. But what you're seeing is Trump wants to test the boundaries of the Constitution and executive power, and he wants it to go to the court system because he wants it to get up to the Supreme Court and test, are they willing to keep expanding presidential executive powers? So that's going to be really interesting. The California wildfires are just heartbreaking. Over 15,000 homes and buildings have been destroyed. The recipe for success here is, how are they going to cut all the red tape? And I was listening to it in California, in a lot of these communities, when you want to build a home or rebuild a home or remodel or rebuild a business, the red tape that you have to go through, the amount of approvals and submission of plans to so many different agencies can take anywhere from 18 months to 36 months. Well, if that's the case, none of these places are going to be rebuilt because people aren't going to be able to afford to go back. So that's going to be a real interesting thing for the governor of California and the mayors and a lot of these county councils to cut the red tape so that they can move forward as a team and get these places rebuilt. I'm really upset that, they're taking away security detail for people who have fought in the war. It's no, secret that Trump was a draft dodger. He didn't fight in the Vietnam War. He came up with some excuse about bone spurs. To take away security detail for people who have given their life for our country and are threatened by foreign adversaries is a pretty bad thing. So we're going to have to watch that. So after the pardons were given to a lot of the January 6 offenders, the judges still ordered that a lot of these people should stay away from Washington, D.C. and the Capitol. And after the pardons were given, they showed up at the Capitol. The Oath Keeper guy showed up at the Capitol. There's a thing coming out, I think, on Netflix on the head of the Oath Keeper, how his wife and children have come out and said how crazy the guy is and how dangerous he is and some of the things that he talks about. So that's one of the things that we're going to have to keep a watch on. Do they refortify? Do the Oath Keepers and the Proud Boys refortify? Our Supreme Court is going to play a major role going forward. I think over the next 3 years, we're going to have to determine, do we have the separation of powers between the legislative, the judicial, and the executive branch? Or is the executive branch more powerful than the other two branches of government? Senator Bob Menendez, Gold Bar Bob, was crying in court yesterday and ended up with getting 11 years, ladies and gentlemen. He got 11 years for being convicted of taking foreign bribes. This was a former senator from New Jersey. He had a hung jury and didn't get convicted in 2017 for foreign bribery, but this time he did. He's, I think, in his middle 70s, so he's essentially going to spend the rest of his life in prison where he should go. I'm really excited about the Super Bowl coming up. My Birds, my Eagles, fly, Eagles, are going against the Chiefs. The Chiefs are an amazing juggernaut. This is I believe their fifth Super Bowl that they've gone to for Patrick Mahomes. They've had 7 conference championships. They played the Eagles 2 years ago and beat the Eagles. I think the difference maker this year is Saquon Barkley, the running back that they got from the New York Giants. He's incredible. It's less pressure on Jalen Hurts. I think it's going to be a close Super Bowl, but I know I want the Eagles and I believe they can win, but there's just something about Patrick Mahomes and how good he is and what he can do when the game is on the line. Kendrick Lamar is going to play at halftime for the festivities. Rolling Stone magazine came out with its 250 best albums of the 21st century, and I think you're going to be really surprised. The number 1 album was Beyonce Lemonade. They had a couple Jay-Z albums in the top 10. Kanye West had 3 in the top 25. But what really disappointed me is Eminem, Marshall Mathers, his album, his first album, or any of his albums weren't ranked until 44th. I totally disagree with that. He is much better than having the 44th best album. So we'll have to deal with that. NBA is really suffering. A lot of the players under this new load management are not playing consecutive games. In fact, a lot of the players are sitting 3 and 4 games at a time. It's a real problem, so much so that Adam Silver is thinking about going from 48 minutes a game down to 40 minutes a game. That would be a crime. I think what they should do is shorten the season. They'll never do it because of the amount of money that they get from the games. Obviously, the NFL wants to go from 17 games to 18 games. It's very dangerous for the players. I think what the NBA is going to have to do is prevent consecutive games. So you have a game tonight in Los Angeles, fly all night for a game tomorrow on the East Coast. I think they should prevent consecutive games, and then that way, they will get away from this load management stuff. Because if you buy season tickets or you buy tickets to see the Sixers versus the Celtics and you go there, you spend $800, but Joel Embiid isn't going to play, or some of the best Celtics, Porzingis, Jason Tatum, they're not going to play. It's not fair to the fans. I think the three-point shot has killed basketball. Plus, we don't really know all these players. A lot of these players who are drafted number 1 come from overseas. We've never heard of them. Some are 19 years old. And the NBA is going to have to do something, because LeBron James, Steph Curry, Kevin Durant can't play forever. And it doesn't seem like the new stars, Anthony Edwards, are taking over like LeBron did. So that's a real problem for the NBA. I think baseball has a real problem. They don't have a salary cap. Los Angeles Dodgers just picked up another key reliever. Their team is, half from the Japanese league. It's like a farm league for the Los Angeles Dodgers. The baseball union is the strongest union in all of sports, and they will not agree to a salary cap, a hard cap. And so if the teams go over it, they pay a luxury tax. Well, the Los Angeles Dodgers are going to end up paying $400 million on a luxury tax. And they're doing all this funny accounting where for Shohei Ohtani's $700 million contract, all of it's deferred. So it doesn't count against his annual salary. He's only getting $2 million counting against his annual salary. And then when he retires, they're going to pay him $600 million. So I think they're going to have to do something about the luxury tax as well as a salary cap. If you look at it, in this offseason, the Los Angeles Dodgers have spent $1 billion, in new salaries. To give you an example, on the small market teams, Tampa Bay Rays, as well as the Minnesota Twins, have spent $13 million in the offseason on new salaries. So something is going to give. So, ladies and gentlemen, that's it. Let's see what this investigation by the NTSB brings for the plane crash. Our hearts and our feelings go out to those that died and their family and their friends, and let's everybody be safe out there. Thank you very much. Bye-bye. And L'Oreal Lavigna, thank you for listening.